Thank you. Firstly to AFPA and to Contractors, thank you very much. It's the ultimate renewable energy industry, and I'm really excited to be able to support its sustainability through this bill, and hopefully the Senate will see the sense of it in due course following this hearing. AFPA, your submission outlines industry's grave concerns about the potential legal precedent created by the federal court ruling recently. Can you briefly outline those concerns and the ambiguity that you suggest it gives, and I think Ms Gardiner outlined to the broader industry?
Thanks, Senator McKenzie. Stacey, I might go first, if that's okay. You're absolutely right. We think this is an absolute threat of uncertainty right around Australia, particularly in Tasmania, I think we should say, because that's where so much of the activity against our sustainable native forest industries has been based in the past and is still very much active. We certainly know from the social media monitoring of the groups that are involved in that campaign, if I can call it that they're certainly focused on using this uncertainty as soon as they can to create a problem and difficulty in all of our states that are under the RFA agreements. And so it is seen across the industry as quite an existential threat to the future of native forestry in Australia. We were delighted that the government, and indeed the bipartisan support for RFAs has been incredibly welcomed by the industry for the last couple of decades, and the only way we've been able to manage as a whole industry, keeping those things in balance, environment, social and economic outcomes for our states and our people. But we were mortified, I guess, that the signing of those RFAs into law over the last couple of years, that's the rollover to the next series of agreements, has now been put at risk all over Australia. And as I say, I think it's particularly likely that we're going to see those challenges emerge in Tasmania more quickly.
Ms Gardiner, do you have anything to add?
Yes, just to reiterate Mr Hampton's comments in relation to the impact it is having on communities widely within Australia, in particular, as Mr Hampton said, Tasmania. We're seeing some significant uncertainty within Tasmania as well at the moment, which is very concerning.
So what's the Commonwealth's role in addressing this uncertainty?
Certainty. It's to provide certainty, Senator McKenzie. Obviously, the EPBC Act is a Commonwealth Act, and the RFAs are joint agreements between the state and the Commonwealth. But what's being used here is a misreading of a particular section of the Commonwealth Act. It's not a joint act, it's a Commonwealth Act. I think it's pretty clear to most people who've been around the industry for a long time and understand RFAs that the particular clause that this amendment that you've put forward is seeking to address has been misinterpreted, if I can put it that way. It's been certainly been given a different interpretation than it has been for the last couple of decades, and that's what's created the uncertainty. So the amendment does nothing more really than seek to create clarity. It's no change, it's just to put back into place the certainty that has been there for the last couple of decades, and that's wholly and solely a Commonwealth role.
So have you raised these concerns with the Commonwealth?
Yes, ever since the court judgment, which, as you heard in the statement, was more than a year ago, or about a year ago, we've been asking the Commonwealth to act to remove that uncertainty, and this is the result at this stage. We think.
And what's been their response thus far?
Well, they've certainly said that it is a matter of concern, and they've certainly given us all indications of support for the continuation of sustainable native forestry harvesting in Australia, in Victoria, but also in those other states, New South Wales, Tasmania and Western Australia. But as yet there's been no action taken.
Are you concerned, given the surprising inclusion of RFAs into the Samuels Review, into the EPBC Act, where future regulatory and legislative changes could be going with respect to the forestry industry more broadly in Australia?
Well, I don't know about quite the conclusion of it, but certainly we were very surprised about the Samuel report and review, and I'm a little perplexed actually, because what Samuel's review identifies is that something like the RFAs is appropriate for the way to manage something as complex as forestry. So we were perplexed about what Samuel's review actually wanted in terms of the sort of management of forest industries, because the proposition in Samuel's review is actually the sort of thing that you find iterated in RFAs anyway. So we're not quite sure where that's going. More duplication,
maybe. Just finally, and then I'll move to Ms Gardiner. You mentioned the domestic demand for particularly our hardwood. Where would we be getting a replaceable product, if not plantation? Obviously not. It's not a suitable replacement. Where would we be getting, what is the environmental implications of that replacement product?
Yeah, thanks. As I mentioned in the opening statement, it's quite an inelastic good. If you look around this room, this is all hardwood, Australian hardwood in this room and throughout Parliament House. It's not, you can't replace it with something else. You could try replacing it with plastics, I suppose, but I'm not sure everyone would really love that. So what happens if you can't get enough of it in Australia, and we don't, we have real trouble supplying our own needs as it is because our harvesting is very, very, very limited in Australia. What will happen, Senator McKenzie, is it will come in from overseas. We face a scourge of deforestation in the world. It's, as I said, I'm working on this international forestry report, and the one thing that we're struggling globally to stop is deforestation. It's almost impossible because Interpol's identified timber, the illegal timber trade, as the second largest global trade after drugs, and it will continue to grow. And I would just be so ashamed if we end up being a bigger part of that story than we already are. We can't supply our own timber needs now, and if we move into a situation where it becomes more and more difficult, as Stacey was identifying, to have harvesting in Australia, then it'll just mean we're participating more and more in the import of timber into Australia. Not all illegal, of course, I hasten to add, but certainly a significant amount of it is.
Ms Gardiner, you mentioned concerns about activities of activist groups against timber harvesting operations that actually are affecting the forest contracting sector. You've given us a couple of examples. Who, in the particular example you talk about the boundary markings, which organisation was responsible for that action?
Look, I would have to take that on notice. I'm not aware of which environmental group.
All right. Thank you. Workers have lost their jobs, income, working hours as a result of these injunctions. Can you quantify some of that for us, please?
Yes, sure. So in terms of business loss, it's a significant impact to the business. So lost productivity in terms of equipment is significant, in the millions of dollars. These businesses are highly geared in terms of the equipment that they invest in, and as a result, a contracting business can easily invest over $5 million in equipment, and they are unable to do that at the moment because of the uncertainty that rests within industry. In terms of employment, for example, at the moment we have 3 contracting businesses with over 50 employees that haven't got a contract past June because of this continued uncertainty, and that's in Gippsland. And this is, they've already lost 10 employees across the 3 businesses as a result of the uncertainty. So these are the impacts they're having in regional communities.
So in terms of, thank you, in terms of the Central Highland coops subject to the injunction, how long have these injunctions been in place, and what impact more broadly on the industry within the Central Highlands?
So the injunctions have been in place for over 2 years. So you can imagine the uncertainty that's caused over a 2-year period. More broadly within industry, I can speak for Harvest and Hall. Mr. Hampton might speak more broadly for industry. But the financial impacts to businesses and the lost revenue is in the millions.